very
very
true.
interesting. So, do you have your favorite stories? Do you have something that sticks out to you that is a multicultural wedding?
Oh, sure. Oh goodness, I have so many.
So many.
Oh, there's so many, but there's so many beautiful ones. Like this year, I married a couple, Tanya and Ken. Tanya, Canadian, Ken from Belgium, and they live in Switzerland. And they came to Portugal to get married. Um, and just like the most amazing people. And what I actually loved is they came to me and they said, "Hey, Carly, we know an end result that we want to have for our wedding ceremony, but we don't know how to get there." And I was like, "Okay, what is it?" And they said, "We want everyone to like dump different colors of broken glass into something, and then we want to take that glass and have it sent to a glass blower so that can be made into a beautiful piece of art, of glass art. And we want
Oh.
to keep that as a memory of our ceremony." And I was like, "Ah, this is amazing." And they said, "Okay, but we have no idea how to make it into like part of the ceremony." And I was like,
Uh-huh.
I said, "Okay, give me some time to think about it." And so what we ended up doing is before the wedding ceremony, with the help of the planner, as guests came in, this empty vase was sitting there, and all of the guests were invited to pour in what was a shot glass full of different colors of glass.
Mm-hmm.
And the couple likes to party and likes to drink, so we got to make a nice joke about why was there glass in the shot glasses and not, Jägermeister. Um, so all the couples did this before, or all the guests did this before, and then we brought it up to the ceremony space. And then we kind of had it there. And towards the end, I then started to talk about how their wedding wasn't just the joining of their lives, but the joining of everyone there. It really was creating this new one big mix of a family. And this was not going to be the last time that they were going to celebrate their love with all of these people.
Mm.
There were going to be ski weekends, there was going to be crazy weekends to Vegas, there was going to be, Christmases together. And so this love and this family together will only keep being shared amongst everyone here. And so that's why we had everyone pour in the glass because they're all part of the marriage that they're creating on that day. And then I had Tani and Ken pour in the last bits as just
Mm-hmm.
showing this is the bringing together of everyone. And then ask them at
Oh.
the end, once you have this beautiful piece of glass artwork, to put it in an important place in their home, and to every time they looked at it, to just remember that their love brought all of these people together, and that their love and their marriage is not built on just the two of them, but built by everyone in their life, just like that piece of art. But then I've also had, we talk about multicultural being multicultural within the couple, but I think there's another way for weddings to be multicultural, and that could be when couples are living and marrying in a place that is not their own.
Mm-hmm.
So last year I married Annie and Stuart, who are from Scotland, most amazing couple ever. They learned, they became teachers of English as a second language. They moved all over Europe. They ended up in Bilbao in Spain and ended up buying the school they were working for and
Oh,
have been
wow.
living there for the past 6 years. So then they invited me to come and conduct their wedding ceremony. And they told me about a tradition that is specifically Scottish, which is I apologize to all the Scots out there. My Scottish is terrible, but it's a quick, which is a two-handled love cup. And
Okay.
so in Scottish tradition, the marriage is only really sealed after the couple has shared a drink from this cup.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually of whiskey. The bride did not like whiskey whatsoever. And so she's like, "I don't know what we're going to do. Maybe I can just fake it. Maybe we could put something else in." And I said, "Well, considering that you live in Spain, that Spain is your home, you have no intention of leaving, you speak Spanish, you live, lives in Spanish, and this is very much part of your identity as a couple now. Why don't we, instead of putting whiskey, why don't we put Spanish wine instead?" And then we'll talk about that and we'll say how this is a representation of the mixing of your lives and your cultures. Because while you at your base are wholly Scottish, your life has now been sprinkled or seasoned with this Spanish influence. So I think there's a really great way for couples who are marrying abroad, even if they're from the same place, to also include parts of the culture of the
Yeah,
place where they're marrying into it. So yeah, those are
definitely.
some of my
I
favorites.
love that. especially if they end up having children in that country, and
Exactly.
that would give them even deeper root to that culture.
Exactly. And it wasn't just that it was a destination wedding. It was really something
Yeah.
that is who they are. Though I have last year I married this amazing couple, Megumi and Ken. So a Japanese couple living in the United States,
Mhm.
marrying in Portugal.
Oh, wow.
So Ken had come to Portugal years before, lived there for a few months for work, and he just fell in love with the city. And so when him and Megumi got together, he knew the first vacation that they did outside of Japan, he wanted to take her to Porto specifically. And he just wanted her to
Oh,
see the
wow.
city and fall in love with it the way he did. And they did. They so much fell in love with it that they decided to get married there.
Wow.
So they really wanted to bring in something from Porto, like to
Mm-hmm.
just so it didn't feel like they were just doing a ceremony in the city, but that they were really embracing it. So we actually did a wine ceremony. So we had them do essentially they shared 3 glasses of port wine. So, port wine being from the city of Porto. And each one of them, one representing their past, one representing their present, and one representing their future. And it
Mm-hmm.
was a really beautiful way to incorporate the wine that they love and something that's very emblematic from the city that they love in their ceremony that was, conducted by an American, being held in Portugal, where I learned 8 different phrases in Japanese so that we could
Oh,
keep
that's
their
a
Japanese.
lot.
It was terrifying. So, but we did that so that we could make sure some of their guests didn't speak any English nor Portuguese. So we wanted to make sure that they could follow along. And I mean, like I said, I only speak English and Portuguese, but I've been asked to speak Irish, Polish, Chinese, Japanese, a little bit of Danish. Like it's been a mix. So if a couple
Wow.
ever challenges me to it, I'm always up for it because for me, it just language feels so important, like as a way to make your wedding ceremony inclusive.
Hmm. I really appreciate your effort into learning. Is it something you offer them that I wouldn't even like if I would be getting married, I wouldn't even ask you that because I would just assume that's probably something that you wouldn't do. That's amazing.
Well, because right, this has been the basis for how the company started. So, and of
Okay.
course, we marry sometimes just two Americans, so there's no extra sort of culture or anything, but everyone on our team. So I now have there's 10 of us in total on my team. Everyone on our team is at least bilingual.
Mhm.
Some of our other ones are even trilingual.
Mhm.
Um, and everyone lives a multicultural life in some way. So whether it be my celebrant Vanessa, who is half English, so English father, German mother, lives in Portugal with her partner from Malta, or Sara, who was born in France to Portuguese parents but lives here. Everyone on our team is multicultural, and so that idea of having languages be a way of being inclusive of cultures is really important. So, which is
Mhm.
why, we have English, Portuguese, French, Spanish, German, and Flemish languages that we
Wow.
offer. So, I mean, we try and cover a lot of the
Yeah.
big European languages, but sometimes, yes, we get thrown for a loop. And you know what? We've never had if a couple asks us that, or if we could feel like that would be important for them, that feels natural to us to just do whatever we can to be inclusive for our couples and to help them in any way we can. Because language is just so important. I think I'm sure as you know, in your marriage,
Yeah.
it is how we express ourselves in our most basic way. It's what our native tongue is what we always go back to
Yeah.
best express ourselves. So to
Mhm.
just be able to bring everyone along, I mean, we have different ways we approach doing multilingual ceremonies, but for us, the challenge of, learning a few words in a new language to make people feel more welcome, that's always something we want to do.
Mhm. I love that. And I actually was going to ask you a question about bilingual ceremonies. So this is a really good like overlap to it. But do you
Right.
have any do you have any advice and or helpful tips for the couples who are planning to have this blended uh, bilingual, sometimes even multilingual wedding. And the reason they want to have that because maybe they have some grandparents who are coming from another country and they wouldn't understand, or more importantly, they wouldn't feel included. You don't want that feeling of why did I even get invited? I really don't feel that I belong here. But then couples would get worried that if they want to have the ceremony in two languages, it would end up being too long or it will bore
Mhm.
the other person, and they try to mix them up a little bit. So what would your advice be on that?
Yeah, I love talking about this. So usually what I tell couples is there's kind of about three ways to do this. So the first one is you do everything in both languages. So right, you say a paragraph in English, then you say a paragraph in Portuguese. That gets really long,
Mm-hmm.
and tiring and boring for people who speak both languages. So if it's like Chinese and Flemish, where there's very little overlap, okay. But in my case, yeah, in Portuguese and English, because so many Portuguese speak English very well, it's a blessing of
Mm-hmm.
marrying a Portuguese. It really does get redundant because most of the Portuguese were bilingual speakers. That said, it still felt really important for us. If we know a couple is going to want to choose that option, we as celebrants, so what we do is we say, okay, there's a main language that the couple speaks. Say it's English. And so, okay, we're going to do everything in English. We're going to create your first draft of your ceremony. We're going to get it perfect in English. And then we're going to translate it into German or into Flemish. But we're going to need to know that before, because the version we're going to create first in English, we're going to make that shorter than it would normally be to accommodate for the fact that I really don't believe in having a wedding ceremony that's more than 45 minutes long, because
Mm-hmm.
by that time people have started to fall asleep. Nothing you can do to
Yeah.
keep their attention. So there's that option. The other one is, and this is what my husband and I did for our wedding, is we did alternating languages. So we did the introduction in Portuguese. Then we did the next reading, we did it in English. And then we did a part where we talked about our grandparents. My husband did it in Portuguese, and I did my part in English. And what to accompany that along so that no one was lost in our programs, we had the translation into the other language. So when someone was speaking in Portuguese, the English translation was there. When someone was speaking in English, we had the Portuguese translation there.
Mm-hmm.
The third option, and I would say, but this is probably the most frequently used one, is to have a main language and then to have sprinklings. So it would be, say, the main language is in English, and then you would have a sprinkling of things in Spanish, for example. So maybe you'd have the welcome in both languages, and then you'd talk about their story just in English. And then you'd get maybe to the part where you talk about the wedding vows or introducing the wedding vows, and then you would have that in both English and Spanish. And then some couples will recommend, if they're doing, say, repeat after me vows or repeat after me ring exchange, that we'll do something like, so for the person who's the English speaker, I would first say the line in the other language. So I'd first say the line in Portuguese, then say the line in English. They would repeat the English. And so
Mm-hmm.
that way the Portuguese speakers are following along. And then on the
Mm-hmm.
other side, for the other person who's a native Portuguese speaker, if it feels important for them to say it in their own mother tongue, I'd first say the line in English, and then then I'd say the line in Portuguese, then they would repeat the Portuguese.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then usually the best part, the end, kind of the pronouncing of married couple, husband and wife, husband and wife, whatever you choose, doing that in both languages. And then, yeah, that's kind of the sprinkling approach. There is actually, I'd say, a fourth approach, which is when you have uh, two different native languages and your common language as a couple is English. So I had this great couple, Wen and David. David being Belgian, Wen being Chinese. Uh, we did the ceremony in, so Belgian, Flemish speaking Belgian. So we did the ceremony in English. I did everything in
Mm-hmm.
English, but we had a reading in Chinese, which Wen's brother did, and he explained kind of the meaning behind it first and then did the reading. And then we had a reading in Flemish from David's sister. So, and she also gave like a little bit translation before. And so that was another way to kind of bring cultures together through language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. I love your list that, it makes it easier for couples like, oh yeah, I fall into the first one, I fall into the second one, just kind of go from
Exactly.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think I've had couples. I remember last year, Samantha and George. Samantha wrote me, I don't know, I think about a year and a half before her wedding. And she told me, she said, "Oh, I'm so happy I found you because I was on the brink of hiring a translator and, getting the headphones so that we could do like simultaneous translation while you were giving the ceremony." I remember, and I've done that before where I've been simultaneously translated, half the guests are sitting there with
Oh,
headphones and listening.
really?
Yeah, and that was at a point it was in a language that I didn't speak, and now
Mm-hmm.
I have a celebrant who speaks that language,
Mm-hmm.
so then, now I'd be able to offer that better. But if it were something where that felt really important to a couple, and we didn't have that language capacity, I would say okay. But if we do, I'd really say, I don't think people are as impatient as we think they are. People are willing to, if your ceremony has a lot of love and a lot of laughter and a lot of happiness, if people don't know what's going on for a minute or two, I think that's okay. Like, I don't think they're going to be lost and you're going to lose the energy. I think you gain more by making sure everyone's included. So yeah, but that's my personal view.
That's a very good advice, that make sure that you have the ceremony more engaging in a feeling way, because feeling is everybody's language. You can make people feel a certain way without even speaking each other's languages. And if you can achieve that in your ceremony, that everybody's gonna enjoy it and talk about it after how amazing it was, even if they didn't understand majority of time what was going on. So what we didn't talk about it is the vows, what couples
Yeah.
need to write their vows. What have you seen that would be like the biggest mistakes that couples would do, or that they forget to include, or they don't include, or they want to include but you think it wouldn't fit good? So just imagine a couple who's about to get married and they have this blank sheet of paper and a lot of stress of, I don't even know where to start.
So, what I tell couples is the biggest thing if you're going to write your own wedding vows, and I really encourage it, I think it's amazing and completely different when you write your own wedding vows. I tell them I like to give them a couple of rules to guide them so that their vows are balanced. And I learned that really early on. I think it was one of my first ceremonies, and I remember so, Portuguese Canadian guy marrying a German woman, and the woman worked in communications, so she was incredibly eloquent. She wrote these vows. I mean, they were about 10 minutes long, but they were just beautiful. They were so heartfelt. I mean, they almost brought me to tears. And I don't cry easily when it comes to other people's weddings. Um, and then the groom went, and his vows were about 2 minutes. They were super jokey, and we're just on a completely different plane than his
Wow.
wife's. And you just felt the imbalance, and you couldn't help but think like, wow, this is kind of like a really bad sign for their marriage that you guys would just be so off
Mm-hmm.
in the tone, in the length, and everything. Um, so what I tell couples is a couple things to decide on. First, decide on your opening and closing lines. Like, how do you want it to start and how do you want it to finish? Like, my dearest Miguel, you're my best friend, and then go from there. And then you want to close it like, and I vow to always finish it there, or and I love you and I vow to always love you forever, something like that. So first of all, you have these bookends, so that gives that symmetry in between your two vows. And so I don't think you're giving anything away if you two talk about the first thing you say and the last thing you say. So that's fine. Then the other thing I would say is a word count. So word count, time, like when you time yourself, I don't think that's a really good one. I think a word count is better also because it means you have actually sat down and you've typed it up on your computer and you've
Mm-hmm.
given it forethought. If you want to use like one of those cute little booklets, you can go back and handwrite it. That's awesome. But I recommend that so once you have those bookends, then you both kind of go away and you write your vows. And then you come back and you just tell each other after this first draft, like, what's your word count? Are you both around 200 words? Are one of you at 1,000 words and one of you are at 300? If so, then you want to move your way direction towards each other. Maybe say, okay, let's get it to around 500. So one has to shorten, one has more space to play with, because that way they'll feel more even.
I'll
Then
give
the other
you a
thing,
few words to you, and then
exactly. You
I
take a
have
few,
too
I take
much.
a
I'll
few.
give.
Um, I'll give you some ideas. Um, and then you also want to talk about tone. Like, is it going to be really romantic? Are you going to joke? Are there any things that are off limits? Like, that's a really important thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Maybe when you first met, you were both drunk and, you barely remembered each other's name the next morning. Like, okay, we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
So just things like that. So kind of what's off limits, and then tone. Like, is it going to be, are you joking at all? Like, is there space for joking? Is there space for laughing?
Hmm.
Like, these are very general things that you can talk about and agree on as a couple that I think doesn't give anything away about your vows. And I think it's really important. The other thing you could do, and I've done this as well, if you have a really great celebrant, and hopefully you do, you can each individually send your vows to your wedding celebrant, and she or he can be your arbitrator. So this is essentially what I've done for couples. And I've said, okay, so and so's vows they're a little long, they're longer, and they're more on the emotional side, and then I'll tell the other person, like, okay, so and so's vows, they're actually a little bit on the shorter side and they've got some lightness to it. Maybe you want to, talk about that a little with each other. Maybe you want to bring in some lightness. And so I essentially have arbitrated between couples, like, how to get them to that balance point where their vows feel balanced and even.
I think
Yeah,
that's what I would choose. I think that's what I would choose. I need
yeah.
somebody behind the scenes to balance us out.
Yeah, and I love doing that, and I think it's also, and it does. I think it weirdly, not weirdly. I think it reassures couples. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, I've happened to written vows 3 different times for the same man, and I have read lots of beautiful vows and been witness to incredible wedding vows. But yeah, I think it just gives couples maybe that little extra added benefit, and it's something that we do just because, if it makes our couples happy, it makes them happier with the day, and it makes the ceremony
Yeah.
better. Like, I think that's great. I would hate for anyone to ever walk away from their ceremony and think, wow, my wife or my husband's ceremonies or vows were so much better than mine. Like,
Hmm.
damn, I really dropped the ball on that.
Yeah.
That would be heartbreaking for me. I wouldn't want that to happen.
Yeah. I feel like you have so many great advices that it's just yeah, lot of learning and lot of really good tips for couples that maybe even doesn't even have anything to do with your job, but you're just putting so much into helping them and making sure they have this good experience. So let's talk a little bit about the courses that you created. Um,
Yeah.
I'm assuming that you made them because you felt like there's some type of lack in this part of the wedding planning, and that's probably what motivated you to create them. So, what did you find that couples would need help with? Maybe before they hire a wedding celebrant, or as they are going through the process with them, if they maybe are not having any. I don't know if that's even a case. Probably, maybe if they are getting married in a church or just at the courthouse, and maybe they decide not to hire a celebrant and they just want to do everything on their own. So there's just some guidelines that they maybe would want to have. And my second question, that kind of part of this would be, is that what kind of questions would you tell couples to make sure that they ask from the celebrant before they hire them, or as they're trying to decide who would be the good fit for them?
Okay.
I don't know. I hope this is not a big
Yeah.
question. If it is, we
No,
can
no.
break it down.
It is a big question, but we'll break it down.
Okay.
So starting with the courses, so I wrote the one on how to write. So I created one on how to write your perfect wedding vows. That was the first one. And that really did come out of couples just coming to me and feeling really lost. And then the other one, How to Write Your Perfect Wedding Speech, came out of the same way. Couples, being really unsure. Or my favorite was the groom who wrote me and he said, Carly, your wedding ceremony is too good. I don't have anything, I don't know what to say in my wedding speech. And I thought that was a really great compliment, but I also felt really bad. I was like, oh no. So that's how the second one came about. And I really did find, so there are lots of articles written about how to write wedding vows, but I feel like there wasn't anything that was really step by step. Like, I'm going to guide you through the process. Like, I'm going to tell you the structure of your vows, which there's plenty of articles that do, but no one then said, okay, here's some ideas, here's some questions to ask yourself to like generate ideas for, or to get material for your wedding vows. So that's one of the things I talk about in the course is just, hey, here's some questions to just get you thinking, like, that first meeting or the things you adore about your partner, or, just there's so many things that we talk about. And then talking about how to kind of ruthlessly edit yourself down, and then talking about presentation, because on the day, especially if you're a nervous person, if you're going to be nervous or really emotional, like, how does that work? How do you, present your vows in a way that you're going to look back and you're going to be like, wow, I'm really proud of those vows, not in an egotistical way, but I'm proud in the sense that I feel my partner really understood the emotions I wanted them to feel on that day. So we talk about all of this kind of stuff. And then the same thing with the wedding speech. Like, we talk about structure and the purpose of the wedding speech, and give lots of ideas for how to get there and how to create something beautiful and memorable. I think that's what everybody wants. So that's the courses, and that's how they came to be. And I mean, while they're sold to the general public, I offer them to the couples that I that work with our team for free, because, well, we just kind of want them to have that resource. And also because we just saw, like we talked about before, it was a point of stress for them. And I really do think weddings in general can be quite stressful. But I think the stress sometimes really gets focused on other things, like making sure my gluten intolerant aunt has like an option for the cake. While that's very important, and I want your aunt to feel included, like, your cake is not the most important thing. Like, I tell couples, you can have the flowers, you can have the planner, you can have the venue, you can have all of that. But if you don't have a wedding ceremony, it's just a party,
Yeah.
right? It's not a wedding.
Yeah.
So this is something to be focused on, something to be taken as just as important as the other things. And then, even out of the whole ceremony being important, your vows are the headliner. They're the most important thing. So if I was going to say, if there's something for a couple to, not that I want them to stress about, but something for them to like feel is important and should, be considered thoroughly, it should be their vows. It should definitely be their vows.
Yeah.
And then after that, probably second to that is the wedding speech. So that's kind of how I came to create all of that. So that was the first part of your question.
Yes.
And the next question was kind of, if a couple decides not to use a wedding celebrant or to use a wedding celebrant, what should they look for?
Yeah.
So I think that's such a great question. You had given me a little heads up on that. And so I actually did take some notes. This was the one.
Okay.
Some notes before. So I think an important question is asking why the person became a wedding celebrant. Understanding their kind of journey to it and how they ended up there is really important. Like, someone just thought, oh, it would be cool. I like weddings. I like to party. That'd be great. Or someone could have all of the skills you need. Like, I'm a really good public speaker. I'm really good at storytelling. I'm all of these sorts of things. Those are great. But if maybe they lack the ability to connect or the empathy that comes with being a wedding celebrant, then maybe they wouldn't be the right person for you. I also recommend couples ask celebrants what their philosophy on wedding ceremonies is. I mean, that's very philosophical, but and I don't know if every celebrant has thought about that, but I think it's an important one, because so that'll tell you, one, has your wedding celebrant thought about that? And if they have, what have they come up with? Have they been able to be introspective about their work and what it means and what they bring to you? I would also say ask your celebrant what their style is. So I've had lots of couples ask me that, and my response actually is I'm really adaptable. I would define my style as being what is most authentic to the couple. Like when a couple tells me they have to do something because of tradition or because someone said so, this is where I'm like, yeah, I'm probably not going to be the person for you. But when a couple says we want to do this because it reflects us as a couple, that's when I get excited to work with them. And so that might, be because they're very religious and so they might have lots of religious connotations, or they might be very spiritual, or it could just be something totally different. And whatever that is, I like to think that I'm adaptable into making that happen. If I was really pushed to say what my style is, though, I would say my style is um, I want people to laugh and I want them to cry just a little bit
Hmm.
during my wedding ceremonies. If I hit those two things, then I think it's a good wedding ceremony. Preferably a lot more laughter. And
Yeah.
if that laughter actually is so good it turns into tears, that's actually even the best kind. And then the final question, I actually think the most telling question you can ask a wedding celebrant is, what is your favorite part of the whole process? Because for me personally, I think my favorite part, it's not the obvious one. It's not the wedding day. My favorite part is so we do an introductory call with the couple, no obligation. We essentially just present ourselves. I present my story, tell them about myself, and just see if there's a fit. So if they decide to work with me, then we schedule another call. And this is what I call the juicy bits call. And this is just where I get to get all the juicy bits. Like I ask them about, how they met, first date, first kiss, like kind of how life evolved together as a couple. That 2 to 2.5 hours I get to spend with the couple talking about them and learning about them and hearing everything, just hearing hysterical stories of, first meetings or like heartbreaking time that they've had to spend apart from one another, or maybe when they broke up and then, the universe twisted and turned and brought them back together. Like, I love that part. That is my favorite part because my favorite part is getting to know the couple. Uh,
Hmm.
the wedding day, it's amazing. It really is, but it's not my favorite part. And I think that says a lot about me as a wedding celebrant, like what my focus is. My focus is
Yeah.
on the couple.
It actually, as you were talking, I was thinking about what if a couple would say, you know what, we want the ceremony to be very personal. So we are thinking about maybe a family member can marry us, a
Hmm.
father, a mother, or a sister, usually what they would choose. But I really love that you put so much effort into getting to know them that at the end, when it comes to it, they're gonna feel like you are that person that that knows them, that can stand
Yeah,
up there and talk about their relationship like their dad or mom would, you know.
definitely. And I've actually had this question posed to me a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
And while that is, it's hard to convince a couple that they're gonna know me so well that on their wedding day, that's usually the first time they'll ever see me in person, that they'll run up and hug me because they feel like they haven't, like it's a long lost kind of friend sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to convince them of that in that moment before when they're trying to debate between hiring a professional and asking a family member or friend. And what I usually say to that is, um, I come into the situation with no baggage, with no judgment. I don't know what you were like as a little kid. I don't have any expectations for who you're supposed to be or how you're supposed to act or what your marriage is supposed to look like. I'm going to reflect back to you what you show to me. So when you show me the laughy, jokey side, when you show to me the really intimate side where, when I ask you about your first date, you both kind of look at each other and share a smile and share a laugh. Like I'm going to reflect that back to you. I don't bring in anything else of, yeah, maybe you were my bratty little sister, and I bless my older sister for having done my wedding ceremony, one of my wedding ceremonies. Well, actually, both of them did different wedding ceremonies, and they were both wonderful, and they didn't treat me like the brat I was when I was little. But that's not always possible, right?
Yeah.
And so it's also just that kind of the other part of hiring a professional is that I'm going to show you my wedding ceremony and you can tear it to bits and say,
Uh-huh.
get rid of this, change this, move this, move this, move this. And there are no hard feelings. Like
Yeah.
I'm never going to get upset with you.
Yeah.
With family members, sometimes it's a little bit harder to say, hey, no, we don't want this, or we do want this. And so really being a wedding celebrant or wedding professional really just takes that kind of emotional part out and says, whilst we get to be very emotionally connected via the conversations that we have, when it comes to your ceremony, you're my focus. You are my goal. Making you happy is my only objective. So whether that means you tear my draft to shreds and we start anew, or you decide, actually, no, Carly, we want you to be over on the side here to stand in a different place and not be in our
Mm-hmm.
shots. Because I'm never going to be upset by these things because, yeah, I'm a professional and this is my job.
Yes. Yes. It's what's important is what makes them happy. And
Exactly.
that would at the end make you happy too, because if you see how beautifully come together, then you would feel that your job was done in the right
Exactly.
way. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly it.
Yeah. So if they're having a conversation with a celebrant who's maybe being a little bit too pushy about certain things, that no, this is just how I do things, then maybe just that wouldn't be a great fit for them, right?
Exactly. I think, yeah, I guess that's probably another good question to ask in the beginning is kind of just, how flexible they
Yeah,
are. But that
flexible.
said, I mean, that's a hard thing to judge beforehand.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Um, and most of the wedding celebrants, especially if they're a symbolic wedding celebrant, that means they pretty much have free range of things. But yeah, asking them about their style, I think we'll start to get at that essence of are they really flexible or do they, maybe so for example, I am, I'm atheist. I don't believe in God, but I have no problem with conducting more spiritual or more religious wedding ceremonies for couples
Mm-hmm.
because when that feels authentic to them, I'm comfortable in that. I don't feel like I'm faking or I'm lying because I'm not talking about my own beliefs. I'm talking about their beliefs. And if that, piece of Bible or if it's something, anything, if it's something from the Quran, wherever it may come from, or some other spiritual guidance that they follow, I'm totally fine with
Yeah.
that as long as that is authentic to them.
And I also have to mention that I love that you give a free access to your course to
Oh, thank you.
couples that are you are marrying, because that's like an extra boost that they probably not expecting,
Yeah.
after talking to you. Yeah, that's great. It's just rise up their self-confidence, I think. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it's like everything, just trying to give them, we are still wedding professionals, just trying to give the best service to our couples and make the experience a fun one. I've had couples come to me and say their time with me creating their wedding ceremony. Some couples say it's kind of like marriage counseling a little
Oh
bit.
yeah.
Um, but other couples will say, it's one of their favorite parts of the whole planning process
Mm-hmm.
because it's not planning. For me, it's like it's going back and remembering why are you doing this? What do you love about each other? What kind of drives you a little bit crazy about one another?
Mm-hmm.
Why is your life better for being together? And where do you see your future? Like it's going back to what is, you know, spending a ton of money on flowers, on cake, on meals, on drinks, all of this stuff. That's great. But at the core of it, it's your love and it's your relationship and your bond together. So creating a wedding ceremony with me gets to the heart of that.
Yeah, because couples, or at least I would want to make sure that all my guests feel welcome and feel good. They're having fun. Music is good. Food is good. Is everybody okay? But then you have to remember that they're really here for you. And I feel like you have to get a little bit selfish and say like this is my day and everybody's here to support me with that. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. So, what advice would you give to same-sex couples who want to have their ceremony personalized? What do you feel like it's been their biggest fear or worry? Because I feel like most structured weddings and wedding planning is based on the bride and the groom. So, what did you find the biggest fear, and how can they like personalize it when it feels like it's really about the two of them?
Yeah. So I think that's such a great question. First, I wish I could just tell all same-sex couples that they should be able to talk to any vendor that they want and they would have inclusive materials. That's not always the case.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, when we work with a couple, before our, Juicy Bits phone call where I get to ask all those questions, and we also talk about ceremony structure, we send a prep packet. And so that prep packet has ideas on rituals, on vows, on types of readings, on all sorts of things. And so in our case, we actually do have a version that is for, heterosexual couples and for LGBTQ plus couples. And we try and be really inclusive in that. And so all of our language on our website is really inclusive. We don't necessarily talk about bride and groom.
Yeah.
We talk about the couple as a whole. We, ask couples their preferred pronouns. We really try to be inclusive. I wish I could say that's all wedding celebrants. We're not all there yet, but I think we're all moving in that direction.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably one of the biggest concerns that I feel is not vocalized, but when couples see that our materials are tailored to them, I notice like a visible sigh of relief of kind of like, oh, okay. Like we don't have to constantly be fighting against this like man, wife, marrying together, bride, groom idea. So I completely get that. And I hope for all same-sex couples and all couples in general that they find the right celebrant for them that's inclusive of them.
Yeah.
So from there, I would say kind of how to personalize it. So I think it's almost the same advice that I would give any couple from the beginning. Take all of that influence that you have from your childhood, from your lifetime, from society, films, movies, and kind of just throw it the fuck out. Excuse my language. Like this, heteronormative BS about a woman in a white dress, walks down an aisle, brought by one man, handed off to another man. Just like get rid of it. As a same-sex couple, if there are things that feel really important to you of those traditional aspects, figure out how to make them your own. So Inês and Emma were a lovely couple that I got to marry. So Inês being Portuguese and Emma being English. They live in London. They were married in Portugal. And so two brides, they both wanted to be walked down the aisle. And so I just asked them, how do you want to do that? Do you want to walk in together? Is it important for you to be walked in by your fathers? And so we just said, okay, like, how do we adapt that? Did the same thing for Luke and Lee, which is a lovely gay couple that I married this summer. And essentially it was really important for them to walk in with their mothers. And so they essentially, I remember saying, so who wants to go first? And I think Luke turned to Lee and he said, well, alphabetically, you're first. And that was it. That was the conversation. So I think again, goes back to just realizing that, if you're working with the right celebrant to begin with, they won't feel tied to all these heteronormative ideas of what a wedding should be. And I think they will be there to guide any LGBTQ plus couple in the way that will create a ceremony that feels inclusive of them and their identities and what their love looks like to them. But for me, it's always about, it always goes back to the love, like what feels good for them. And so that's the same for all couples. I actually think at times, LGBTQ plus couples are actually almost freer of that because all those ideas of what a wedding should look like are so heteronormative. It's much harder, I find, for heterosexual couples to step out of that box of what a wedding should look like than it is for LGBTQ plus couples. So maybe it is kind of an advantage to them. But that is to say, if you're working with the right celebrant, your wedding ceremony should look however you want it to look.
That's a great point. It's a great point. And I think it comes out pretty quickly in the first couple of questions of, are you okay with this? Or do we feel awkward or weird? And I think that's something that's pretty obvious in the first couple of questions for couples to LGBTQ plus couples to say like, I don't think this is a right fit for us.
Exactly. And I think,
Yeah.
uh, I think one of the easiest ways is, go look on a vendor's
Yeah.
Instagram or look on their website. Like
Yeah.
on our homepage, we have beautiful picture of myself with Emma and Inej. So, right, we put that on our homepage because we want to communicate that we
Yes.
are inclusive of all couples.
Yeah.
And if your potential wedding vendor isn't doing that, or you don't see that somewhere else on their webpage, you don't see that in their Instagram, then it could just be possibly that no one's ever approached them before. But maybe that's, maybe an
Yeah.
indication that they're not someone you want to work with. And I'm sorry that
Yeah.
that any couple has to be worried about that. That
Yeah.
just sucks. And I hope we get to the point in the wedding industry where we're kind of just all happy to work with couples, whatever their sexual orientation or their gender identification may be.
Or anything else, religion,
Exactly.
skin
Yes,
color, whatever culture they're
exactly.
coming from, just anything. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So let's we you touched a little bit about destination weddings, that when a couple comes to a third country that's not their home country, or maybe used to be, or maybe some of them is from that country, or grew up in that one, and they would want to go back for some reason to get married there. So how does couple need to structure their wedding ceremony differently, or what are some things that they need to think about when they're planning a wedding far away? I know that most of your consultations are via Skype anyway. I'm
Hmm.
guessing that even if they live in a town, but
Yeah.
what other additional things they need to consider and think about that you feel maybe they don't really do otherwise?
Yeah. So I would say, so yeah, being comfortable with Skype is really important. But yeah, for us, actually, for even couples who live in our city, we do everything by Skype. We try and minimize our environmental impact. So we really don't want
Yeah.
to drive as little as possible. And then also we want to make sure that every couple gets the same experience. So we just do Skype calls with everyone. So yeah, being very comfortable with Skype is important. I think if you are marrying in a third country, kind of knowing the culture of the country helps. And by that, I mean, so I have a lot of couples, they may come from North America and, have just think Portugal's beautiful and they want to get married here. And our policy is that we respond to all our emails within 24 hours. I have lots of couples who come and tell me that is not the case with other
Mm.
vendors. And so I hate to be stereotypical, but Portugal is Southern Europe. We're a little more laid back. We're not as, and that's a good thing. I choose to live here and I appreciate that laid backness. But that also means, they're not crazy like I am as an American, 24 hours. Like I'm trying to get back to you within the hour of sending me an email. So I think you sent an email. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, my time, but I
Oh.
was like, oh no, she had to wait this long to hear from me. And I
Oh,
was
no,
so
no,
worried
no.
about that. And I was just my silliness as an
That's
American.
true. That's true.
But so just being aware. And so I've had to tell couples, it's not the culture here that a venue will be on top of
Uh-huh.
your emails, especially when your wedding isn't for another 8 months or even, 4 months, right? They're doing the wedding that they're doing right now. And then maybe the 2 months before, then they'll start being, or the month before, they'll start being really responsive to all of your
Mm-hmm.
things. So yeah. So that's one thing I would sort of advise couples is kind of try and feel out whether you can talk to couples that have been married in that country before, or maybe you can find a planner that is from your country that's working there. So I know a couple of planners who are foreigners who are working here in Portugal and they have a easier time of kind of bridging that cultural gap between the local culture and where they're coming from. So I think that's something to really consider. Then yeah, the how to get married. So if you're planning on legally getting married there, is it worth the the time and stress investment, and is maybe having a symbolic wedding ceremony a better idea.
Mm-hmm.
That's almost always my idea, but my opinion, but check that out beforehand. And then I would say probably the most important thing is that first vendor that you book. So whether it be the wedding planner or the photographer, depending on what kind of size wedding you're doing, like if you need a wedding planner, um, really take your time with that wedding planner and make sure that it's a good fit and that they really understand you. Don't just consider price, like, because it will come down, like down the road, it will come back to you in time. If you picked a planner that you didn't feel as comfortable with, but they were cheaper, like the time you're going to spend trying to explain things or fix mistakes or fix misunderstandings, it won't be worth it in the end. So find that planner that you really connect with, because then once if they understand you, then they're going to be able to recommend you to the right kind of other vendors. If you're doing, say, an elopement and it's something smaller and you don't need a wedding planner, I've had quite a few elopements come to me via the photographers. So I think for an elopement, it's either probably the venue or the photographer. That's the first one you're going to pick. And right, again, make sure you find one that that really gets you, like gets what you're after. And I think the photographer is probably a big one, right? Because you can go on a photographer's Instagram, you can see their vision, you can see how they view weddings, and you either connect with it or you don't.
Yeah.
And if you can connect with them via their photos, then you probably connect with them on an individual level. And then once they've connected with you, then they're going to be able to recommend other vendors that have that same vibe to you. They're going to be able to recommend a great videographer that has the style you're looking for. They're going to be able to recommend a florist or a wedding celebrant. And I think it's finding that first point of contact and making sure it's a really good connection, and then letting them help you create your network. So yeah, those are my biggest advice for couples planning destination weddings.
Those are great. I feel like you have your wedding planner hat on now. You're giving,
I
you
Oh
do,
goodness.
you do.
I do not do that anymore. Isabel and my team, she's a wonderful, amazing person, and she, besides being an amazing wedding celebrant, also does planning. I don't know how she does it. Bless her, she's amazing. I can't do it.
Yes.
Um, yeah, she's amazing.
But that
Not for
not for you. But you do have really good advices. So maybe if you don't even like do it as a commitment, but you sprinkle here and there some good advices for
that's
couples
what I
for
like to
sure.
do. Sprinkle, yeah,
Yes.
like a wedding fairy. That's
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. One of the good points to think of when having a destination wedding that you said is the legal aspect of it. I think that's the most crucial one that you have to think about. Let's just sign the papers at home, and then we go and have the more emotional, meaningful ceremony that we want. So that's very important, and I love that. And then you have touched a little bit about the elopement weddings, and from my experience, I feel like this is becoming more like a trend with couples that they want to have elopement wedding, or they start to plan this big wedding and they kind of change their mind because they get overwhelmed and stressed. You know what? Let's just elope, and then they end up getting married somewhere hidden from everybody else and all the craziness. So I
Yeah.
know this is not really a celebrant question, but I'm now confident to ask you because it looks like you have so many great advices.
Thank you.
Who do you think that elopement wedding is right for? Which couple is it right for, and which couple is just a type of wedding that it's not really that they should
Okay.
do?
So funny you bring this up. My last wedding was with Jocelyn and Michael, and an amazing couple who eloped to Portugal from California. And it was so amazing. It was myself, them. We were on a pier over that was on the south
Wow.
side of Lisbon. So we had the whole city laid out in front of us and the river and just their photographer and their videographer. So it was the five of us. It was so beautiful. I just love elopements.
Mm-hmm.
So, the two elopements I did this year, and I think we probably had five in total, were just so beautiful and intimate. And
Yeah.
I like to say that elopements are the most selfish and most beautiful thing you can do for your love.
Mm-hmm.
I think elopements really bring weddings back to what's at the core. Like, this is about us. And it's just gorgeous when a couple, because there's just, for me, I almost like, when a couple tells me they're doing an elopement, I almost like throw everything else out, like throw the whole script out. I'm like, all right, so like, how do you want to just like tell me how you want it to feel? And like, what do you want? Like, I guess we can just kind of forget all the other structure of it. It's
Yeah.
so beautiful. So I think couples who like simple things, um, couples who are comfortable being selfish about their love and are comfortable putting themselves first. And I say selfish in the most positive way.
Yeah.
Like, I think you need to be selfish for your love. You need to guard your love. Like, you need to guard your marriage because people, things, stressors will try and intrude on that. And so for you to do that, I think it's a gorgeous thing. If it's going to create a lot of conflict in your family, okay, then maybe it's not a great idea. Or if, like you said, if planning the wedding is becoming really stressful, maybe it's important to separate the two things. Maybe it's important to elope, do that for yourselves, and then you can come back or go back home and you can then have a wedding like, your mother has always dreamed of, maybe,
Uh-huh.
or father. I don't want to put it all on moms. Dads could be too. So, but maybe something like that where you have that for yourself, and then you have something that's for everyone else.
Yeah.
But that said, if for other couples, I have some couples who talk to me and they say their wedding and their marriage is really about creating one family. It's really about bringing everyone together. When that is the case, and especially if you haven't had the chance to bring together your families before and all your friends from around the world, which was my case and our wedding, then I think a wedding with lots of people is a good thing. I think an elopement would have really been hard for my husband and I because creating the excuse of bringing my family to Portugal or taking his family to the United States would have been really hard. But weddings are one of those weird things that people will travel for. People will go to the end of the earth for, it's just one of those things we really show up for weddings in our
Mm-hmm.
culture. And I think that's amazing. So if that feels really important to you, like use it, like bring all your friends, all your family together and, have that and enjoy that and just kind of revel in it. But if you don't need that, kind of excuse to bring everyone together, and if you just want something beautiful and for yourselves and something you will always remember as just for you, and do the elopement. Like, I'm a big fan of the elopement. I think
I
they're
have
beautiful.
I have to tell you, I saw this beautiful picture on your website, and you probably know what I'm talking about. But there's the couple, and on the husband, there's a little child just on in
Yep.
a like a backpack
Yep.
carry on,
Uh-huh.
and there's a
Yeah.
bridge, and there are a
Yeah.
couple of people. I don't even know if they've been invited or just random
Nope.
people.
They were
Oh
random
my
people.
gosh,
That was
that's amazing.
It was amazing. It was actually so that couple, Bonnie and George, Bonnie being Australian, George being Brazilian, they met in the UK. Um, they actually had gotten married legally in Brazil, kind of signed the paperwork, and then they had moved to Portugal, didn't have any family there, didn't really know anyone, and they had never gotten to celebrate their wedding. So this was actually kind of it wasn't an elopement, but it was a second wedding ceremony, but where they got to celebrate it and celebrate their love, but do it with their little daughter Mia, who
Hmm.
was the most gorgeous thing in the world. And yeah, we did it actually through the city. So we did it in different locations in the city. And
Oh,
yeah, that moment was so spontaneous. We stopped there and they actually exchanged rings there. And then it was so beautiful. It wasn't even the end of the ceremony. They kissed, and then all of a sudden we hear this explosion of applause behind us, and we look up. The photographer had seen them, but we didn't know those people had stopped. And all of these people around us were just clapping, and they had been a
oh,
part of the moment. It was so beautiful. I was, it kind of chokes me up just to think about it again.
oh.
Um, but I kind of think that's a beautiful thing about
Yeah.
elopements as well too, is that they can be spontaneous things like that can happen, and it makes it so much more beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. One of my
I
favorite
love it.
photos, actually, one of
Yeah.
my favorite ceremonies ever. So I love that you remember that photo.
Yes. And what a great I don't know if it was planned that way, but that they put their child on them because they usually would just kind of walk around on the aisle or do their thing or sit down. But that's like, you are
He
here
was in
with
it.
us, part of this.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
loved it. Okay, Carly, I think that we've been here for so long and I really enjoyed our
It's
conversation.
good. It's gone by so quickly, though. I mean, it's gone by so
Can you
quickly.
feel it's almost like 2 hours?
I know that's kind of crazy, actually, but it doesn't feel like it. It's been so much fun to get to
Yes,
talk with you.
me
And
too. Me too.
really, I can't say enough. This has been a blast.
Thank you. Me too. I had a lot of fun. Uh, as a final note, is there anything that I forgot to ask you you would like to share or add to this conversation?
Sure. I think we've covered a lot. We've covered
Yeah.
so much, and I would just say to couples, just remember what's important. On your wedding day, it's so easy to get caught up in everything else. Just remember what's important, and that's your love. And one of the best ways to keep that at the forefront is to have a ceremony that really celebrates your love. Like have that ceremony be not something to be suffered through, but something that kind of like launches you off into your day. Like it's the start of it and it brings you so much joy and excitement and just is the kickoff for an incredible celebration after that. So, take your ceremony seriously, give it the time that it deserves and enjoy it and find someone to work with on your ceremony that gets you and just really understands what you're about.
I love that. You know what? I had a courthouse wedding, so I didn't have a
Mm,
sort of say what is the word I'm looking for? Proper wedding. But
okay.
talking to you for so long, I think what I would do is this last story that you shared about just um, the couple walking with their child on the streets and saying their vows and feeling that ceremony again. And I think that's what I would do because, we met in Italy. I'm from Hungary. We live in America. And I feel like we have all of these little stories along the way and we have children already. And
Yeah.
we dreamt about having some kind of renewal. Is that how you say it? Vow
Yeah.
renewal
Mhm.
ceremony or something. And my husband always says we should do it in Italy. And I'm thinking, oh, but I would really like to be in Hungary. And I love this idea that why don't we just do it everywhere, a little bit everywhere?
Exactly.
We don't have to do a big wedding. Just go and
Yep.
remember why we're together and what's the locations, what is the story about us in there, and love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
inspired me.
Good. I'm happy to hear it. And if for some reason you also want to come to Portugal to do it, you
Yeah.
just let me know. I will
Okay.
be happy to take care of you guys.
I didn't even ask you, do you travel? Do you go to
Oh,
other
I
places?
do. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I've done weddings in Italy, Croatia, Spain. We've also, my larger team has done weddings in Holland. We have weddings in France. So yeah, no, that was kind of the European part of our
Yes.
name was we wanted to be inclusive of everywhere. So yeah, next year I already have two weddings in Italy. So
Oh,
looking forward to it.
oh wow.
Yeah. It's a
Beautiful.
wonderful excuse. I love any excuse to travel. It always makes
Yes.
me happy.
Have you
Yeah.
did you have a wedding at Lake Como?
Oh, not yet.
No,
Not.
I Americans love that location
Oh,
and
they do.
it's my
They
husband's
do.
favorite place, but I haven't seen a wedding there, just pictures, but it's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. No, I do a lot of weddings. So done a couple in Florence and then in Puglia in the heel.
Okay.
Um, so both of my weddings next year are there, and it's a region that I absolutely
Yes.
love. I lived in Rome for a year. It's where I met my husband. There's something about
Mm,
Italy. We
yeah.
go back almost every year. I think this year was the only year we haven't gone back in 10 years. And like there's something about Italy that just my soul feels happy and at peace
Yes.
in Italy. So
I'm the
it feels
same
full.
way. I'm the same way. Oh my gosh.
It must be the food. It must be the food.
Must be. And the language, the which I
All of
guess
it. I know.
Portuguese is kind of similar. I don't know if
But
how
more
it's
beautiful.
it's
Yeah.
more beautiful.
I'm not biased or anything.
Right. Okay, Carly, I feel like I can go on and on, so I just have to
Oh my
stop
goodness, I feel
myself.
like it's so sounds
Okay,
good.
so let's tell the listeners where can they find you, your website, maybe where can they find your courses, and all of that stuff where you want to connect with them, social media and all that.
Okay, sounds good. So my website is Your European Wedding Celebrant. My Instagram, you can find me at Your Wedding Celebrant. We have lots of wedding porn going up there all the time, and lots of advice that we offer to couples there and on our Facebook, which is also under Your European Wedding Celebrant. My two Udemy courses are called How to Write Your Perfect Wedding Vows and How to Write Your Perfect Wedding Speech. My name's Carly Petracco, so you can also Google that, and you will definitely run into something that I've created that has to do with a wedding, so not to worry.
Perfect. Love it. Okay, Carly, thank you so much for being on a podcast. I think that the listeners would love all of this. And, if you guys have any questions from Carly or me, or you want to connect, just, I think that she's somebody who responds really fast.
I try.
So, don't be shy. Just go ahead and send her some questions. And thank you again for being here and spending these hours with me.
Edith, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.